Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the newest edition of MediateCraft, version 1.3 for Better Than Wolves 4.11. There are tons and tons and tons of changes in this version, so let's jump right into them. Alright, so if we open up this chest, the first and perhaps most visible change in this version is the addition of two new types of armor, cotton armor and silver armor. Silver armor works like just about any other type of armor in the game, rendering pretty much as you would expect. Hold on, let me change the game mode here for us. So as you can see, I put on the silver helm and I get a silver helm. That may be subject to change, but for now, it's basic. There's not really anything I could think of to make silver much distinctive from anything else. Cotton armor, however, is an entirely different can of worms, if we want to use the expression. Cotton armor is unique in multiple ways. The first, as you can see, is that it stacks. The idea is that cotton armor clothes can be folded rather neatly. Second is, it's not really armor, it really is clothes. So here we have socks, intimates, a t-shirt, and a cap. All of these stack up to 16. And if you put on this armor, you'll notice two interesting effects. The first is that it doesn't render. That's right. Steve puts cotton armor underneath his regular skin, so this may be the first armor that lets you actually play around as you want to. Second, cotton armor has a special feature in that if Steve is incredibly comfortable, i.e. at least half his armor is made of cotton, he can run faster. It's not quite sprinting, but it's still something. Watch the screen as I make it 50%. Notice we zoom out, we have the running effect, and if I walk normally, we are 1/10 of the speed faster. For comparison, sprinting is 1/3 the speed faster, approximately 3/10. That's not quite all about this, though. We certainly need to note crafting. So, silver armor is crafted like you would expect. So, for example, if we were to make the silver cap, we would just do it normally. However, cotton armor is crafted a little bit differently. You still use the shapes of the basic armor pieces. However, in the gaps, you need to put a silver needle. So, for example, here's the recipe for the cap. Following would be the recipe for the chest piece, the t-shirt. Again, fill in the gap. The leg pieces have two possible slots for filling in the gap. Here or here. And which is left? Socks. Again, two possible spots for filling in the gap. Again, pardon the lag, this is inside of the MCP codebase, so I may have to reload and such to keep things going well for us. So that basically covers what's new with cotton armor and silver armor. Let's move on to the next change. The next change in this version, well, before I go to the next change, I'd like to review something which never actually has been shown in a release feature. So remember, I talked briefly about the change of emerald ore into more of beryl. So here I placed a couple of emerald ores in the world. Watch what happens when we destroy them. This is one of the rare ways you actually do get a crystal in the world in vanilla Minecraft at present. The crystal that drops is always the beryl crystal. And you can see some of these placed here. Another recent change that hasn't yet made its way into a video, crystals now require a block beneath them to stay. So when I placed that crystal there and there was no block beneath it, it broke and fell down. Now if we mine beryl crystals, remember, we have two possible gems that can come out. And the quantity ranges from 1 to 4, I believe. So here we see some aquamarines and some emeralds. And there we actually had one of each. Wow, I wasn't even aware that that could happen. Learn something all the time. Moving on. The next major change in this version of MediateCraft is the addition of the green villager. I like to call him the miner. Let's take a look at what he does exactly. So, the miner helps with the sustainable world generation. He will sell you, at the cost of different amounts of emeralds, items that you can normally only get by world generation blocks. So, example, zinc from the rather common world gen block sphalerite, rutile from the incredibly rare and hidden block HMSOD on beaches, heavy mineral sands ore deposit, and here's elemental boron from one of the simple resource ores that I haven't particularly talked about in MediateCraft. So if I open up his trading inventory, hello pig, we can see he'll sell these items. The other thing this guy will do is provide a market for your twisted fair trade needs, hence the name of this update. These guys are one of your first sources, one of your primary sources of emeralds. So you can sell them depending on the offers you get. You can sell them any piece of cotton clothing. However, the ratio of bang for your buck, I don't know what the better way to put that would be. The ratio of bang for your buck, you get more bang for the more expensive, relatively for the more expensive pieces of clothing. So you have the best deal with t-shirts, for example. Now, Utak, you're saying, this is going to be difficult because we can't get needles, right? Needles are crafted from silver. That's an expensive resource. Don't worry, I've got you covered there too. The librarian villager has a fairly decent chance, although this one didn't reflect it, of selling you silver needles for a simple emerald. I believe the ratio can get even more favorable than that if he reloads his trading up times. So there is no need to worry about being unable to craft your cotton clothing if you've gone through the process in the regular ways. The last little change to notice there is here I have this villager spawning egg. If we shift briefly to creative mode, so we have unlimited spawning eggs, these green villagers will spawn from creative eggs, and they will spawn from villagers mating normally. So if I press this enough times, without double clicking here, we should eventually see a greenie pop out, just as common as any of the others. There we are. Let's move on to the next change. The next rather small change in this version of MediateCraft is the removal of the halite salt flat, which was the ore for dropping the simple salt item, although it may be dropping placeholder items right now, from the world generation. This block will no longer spawn in world generation under any circumstances. I'll leave you to ponder that as you will. Another small change is if you head to the jungle biome, you have a chance of finding bloodstone generating underground or heliotrope gems in the temples. Well, there's been a small change to each of those in that the ratio is now 4 heliotropes to 1 bloodstone, compared to all the other gem storage items where the ratio is 9 to 1. So we can see here, that was rather interesting. Just a glitch from the MCP system. Here we are. We can see here that gives us 1 bloodstone, and 1 bloodstone gives us 4 of them back. We take off this cotton armor, get the vision back to normal. Another small thing to note is that the sprites for heliotrope, jade shards, and rutile have all been cleaned up a fair bit, so they look less messy. They've been sharpened, basically. I believe that's all with this section. There's still no particular... Jade has not had its functions implemented at the moment. Next up, we've added convenient... What does Flower Child call these? Resource-efficient recipes for the antique gin, the cotton gin. So first of all, remember, this is the newest recipe. You can create it with any of the 4 types of planks. Also, you can create this recipe with siding. However, do note, the siding that you access within the creative tabs menu is actually, I'm guessing based on Flower Child's code, a wood form of siding, sort of like how we have old wood slabs, and that won't actually get you the recipe. However, if you put your planks in your world on the saw and saw them into siding, which you might have seen at the beginning of this video, I had that set up, rest assured you will be able to craft this item conveniently. And I'll demonstrate that here. Iron to the side, slats in the center, gears showing where it can be powered, and siding of any type in the corners gives us an antique gin. I'm going to take a moment to reload to get the frame rate back up. As we continue along, there's another change to note in this version of MediateCraft, of course. I've updated the recipe for marble pillars to match Flower Child's recipe. So as you can see, marble columns, sorry. You use 8 marble blocks and you get 8 columns. The reason Flower Child had implemented this change was, besides just the aesthetics of the recipe, to make sure that you're crafting an amount of columns and amount of pedestals that correspond to make building more convenient, so you don't have to do complicated or annoying math equations. And speaking of pedestals, you'll notice I finally squashed the bug which was causing pedestals to display the wrong texture. So now marble pedestals, which only come in white marble, and only ever will come in white marble, actually display white marble, even in the inventory. And just in case anyone's wondering, they are still working quite fine in the world as well. So, since this happens to be essentially one of my favorite features of the mod, let's take a look at the part of a gorgeous pedestal right there. There we have it. Continuing along, here things get really fun. The other massive change in this version of MediateCraft is the bakery system. I have completely redone almost all the food recipes in vanilla Minecraft. So, first of all, I'm going to set up this stewing pot here, just using the most basic ways. The first thing to notice is how we get bread has been changed. I went into this briefly in a previous version, but now, like I said, the system's been completely overhauled, so I'd like to talk about it again. The new way that you get bread is by crafting 2 flour with either a water bucket or a water bottle. This gives you 3 balls of dough. And just for the sake of demonstration, I'll show that could also have been done with a water bucket. And notice we have the bucket returned, no need to worry. There are other recipes with this. So for example, if we replace one of those flour items with cocoa beans, we will instead get 3 items of cookie dough. And finally, so here's the updated cake recipe. Notice it now gives you only cake batter rather than a cake item. As you might expect, if you're trying to follow along here, you then can put these batter items into the furnace and get out regular food items. So, cake batter becomes the cake item, which still works entirely as we expect it to work. Cake. Cookie dough becomes cookies, and simple dough becomes bread. Now, one other little comment to make. In the stewing pot, now, please note, you cannot actually make or use any of these dough items in the stewing pot because, well, inside the stewing pot there's water, you know, so the dough can't harden. Even if it's getting cooked, it's still remaining liquid and not going to become a food item. So, for automation of food production, we still want to use donuts, or the next option that Mediate provides. I've completely redone the bowl system, the mushroom stew and such. You might call this hardcore bowls. The first change to note is that I've added an efficiency recipe. Again, any of the 3 types of wood siding in the pattern 1, 2, 3, just like the regular bowl, but wood siding instead of planks, and it'll give you the same amount of bowls, further encouraging use of the saw. Once you have these bowls, you can do a couple of interesting things. So, we head to the stewing pot. If we put our bowls in, initially nothing will happen. However, put in the components for a stew, and you'll start making one. Please note that the initial recipe for mushroom stew is now removed from vanilla Minecraft. You cannot simply craft it on a crafting bench. And also note that all types of stew now stack up to 4, which makes mushroom stew actually an item that you might want to use as you're playing through. So there's mushroom stew. Put in 2 fish, and you can get fish stew. And put in 2 pork, 2 raw meat of the kinds pork, beef, or chicken, and you can get meat stew. So if we wait just a moment here, we should be able to see that coming out. There's our meat stew. For fish stew, you need to use cooked fish, which should be no issue because you're already automating the production of the cooking of the fish when you put them in the stewing pot in the first place. So, let's take a look real quick before... Our fish stew is here, and as we can see, it stacks up to 4. Which brings us to our final areas. However, I would like to demonstrate that the eating of these does actually work. So, if I switch off of peaceful for a moment here, make myself rather hungry, give Steve some tiring work, there we go. Then I can eat this stew. And have my hunger restored. Also, you'll notice that the bowl was put back in my inventory, so there's no loss. A piece of code which, honestly, it would have only taken Mojang 2 minutes. 2 minutes to implement, but they have chosen not to for whatever reason. Now, the last change in this version is a very, very simple one. But one that I hope will become one of the features that defines the character of MediateCraft as a mod. Notice right now I'm putting on diamond leggings, and I'm going to jump off a cliff. You might have remembered the title of this map was actually Throwing Steve onto Spikes, or something. So, right here we've turned our game mode back to creative, and we're hovering above a stalactite. Notice that we are still wearing our diamond leggings. Now, if I turn my game mode back to survival and fall on the stalactite, I take fall damage, as you might expect. However, if you fall onto a stalactite while you are wearing no leg armor, or while you are wearing cotton leg armor, the results are rather different. So that pretty much sums up what's happened in MediateCraft version 1.3. Additionally, note that we have snarky comments, a bonus for distinguished individuals made to test something secret, completely reorganized creative tabs, which you might have noticed during the video, completely redone item and terrain sprite sheets, and, hooray, multiple steps towards Minecraft multiplayer mode. I hope you appreciate the content in this version, and thanks for watching.